We continue today in our journey through Matthew's Gospel. In growing desperation, the enemies of Jesus have a barrage of trick questions. One after the other, Jesus has to respond to them. Should we pay taxes to Caesar? Sounded like the perfect no-win question. But Jesus got out of it brilliantly, and we considered that last week. The second wave came from the Sadducees, and this was their question. There was a woman who had 7 husbands. So in heaven, which of those men will be her husband? At one level, we like riddles and trick questions. Children love them. And kids, here's one for you, an old one from way back. What is black and white and red all over? And of course, parents, you will know them. You'll know the answer. A newspaper, of course. Here's another. Why didn't the skeleton cross the road? Because he had no guts. Some are pretty cheesy, aren't they? But the questions asked of Jesus were meant to discredit him, to trip him up. And the Sadducees asked that trick question about heaven. Indeed, we may have serious questions about heaven. What is heaven like? How old will I be when I'm there? If I die old, will I be old? Or if I die young, will I be young? Will I have gray hair? What will we be doing? Will I know everybody? What will I remember from this life? But the Sadducees were not serious in their question. They did not believe in heaven or the resurrection. And Jesus' answer was so wise. He said simply, we cannot imagine heaven through the lens of how things are on earth. And you can look up Jesus' more complete answer in Matthew 22. Then came the third wave with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, their third at bat. Would they finally get a hit or a home run, or would they strike out once again? They sent their best lawyer to ask Jesus, what is the greatest commandment in the law? It should have been, could have been, a serious question. After all, there were 613 laws drawn from the books of Moses and the prophets. They were books written over a span of 1,500 years by 30 different authors. And the writings reflect our growing understanding of God. Some of the laws and notions we have left far behind. Capital punishment for disrespectful children. Capital punishment for not observing the Sabbath. Capital punishment for adultery. And Jesus answered their question about the greatest law. He drew on the Shema from Deuteronomy and the commandment in Leviticus and put them together. You shall love the Lord your God with your heart and soul and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. People all over the world and in many of the great religions have discovered that love is at the heart of God's desire for how we should live. But we still have difficulty with it. For example, we use love in so many different ways. We might love peaches and cream with corn on the cob in the summertime. We might love our children more than life itself. And there is that romantic love from Helen of Troy, or the silliness and sweetness of the movie Celeste and Jesse Forever. Or you might think of Whitney Houston singing, I Will Always Love You. Or that old Beatles song which asks a question, will you still need me, will you still feed me when I'm 64? Speaking personally, I think I'm doing very well. So far, so good. Barbara Brokoff, wonderful preacher, now retired, living in Pennsylvania and Seminole, Florida. said she was invited once to preach at a large historic church, and the young man who showed her to the pastor's study had a large button on his lapel which read, "I love you. Is that okay?" And she said, "I didn't know him, and he only knew I was a visiting preacher. So after rereading his button, I said, 'Yes, I think it's okay.'" And she said his reaction was immediate. He ducked his head, blushed to his ears, and in a choked voice said, that's good." "Why would anybody wear a button," she said, "that said I love everybody?" Jesus says the first and greatest commandment is to love God. And how do we do that? What does it mean to love God? Does it mean that you're cloistered in a cave to pray? That you fast until you see more clearly what is important? That you keep your mind on things that are lovely and of good report? And those things are indeed helpful and important. But here is where love is more than abstract, more than a theory, and impacts you wherever you may be. 1 John 4:20 teaches, "Those who say, 'I love God,' and hate their brothers or sisters are liars. And those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen." There's no beating about the bush there. Love for God expresses itself in love for people. Leonard Sweet is one of the most creative interpreters and expositors of Scripture on the planet. And he suggests we can do this experiment. He says we can test ourselves to see how much we love God. Are you ready for his test? Well, think of the person that you love least. Take a moment. Think of the person you love least. Got it? Now, he says, that is how much you love God. If you want to measure the gasoline in your car, you look at the gas gauge. If you want to measure the temperature, you look at the thermometer. If you want to measure your love for God, you look at the person you love least. What do you think? Do you think that is a good measure? Says John the Apostle, "Those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot say they love God whom they have not seen." Is there any other measure? And we may protest. There are some people who are darn difficult to love. Some people complain, critique, and judge, and are almost impossible to please. There are others who are know-it-alls, and they like to impress by name-dropping or comparing or having the final word. There are others who are explosive and are like bullies, and you're always treading on eggshells. They want their way and will put others down to get their way. And then there are people whom we call marginalized, and culture makes it hard for us to value them or love them. Kella Hannah Wayne is disabled and describes herself as suffering from PTSD, chronic pain, and celiac disease. She says, "If you do not fall into the default group of what is considered normal or neutral or beautiful, then you're considered abnormal, and you're part of the fringe group that is marginalized, and we are more suspicious and nervous of them, and therefore, of course, they're more difficult to love. They include things like race, gender, orientation, disability, your class and income, your appearance, age, religion, mental illness, even. Do you remember the movie Still Alice? In the movie, Alice, the university professor, develops early onset Alzheimer's. And this brilliant linguist at Columbia University, who would lecture at ease without any notes, is now searching for simple words to carry a conversation. And she wishes she had cancer and would not be so ashamed. She goes for a jog on her university campus and cannot find her way back. She gets lost in her own home and fails to locate the bathroom with an inevitable accident. She's abandoned by much of her family, who are professionals and, after all, have a life to live. One day, her empathetic youngest daughter, the black sheep of the family, the underachiever, reads her a simple story and asks, "What is the story about?" And Alice can't remember, and she looks at her daughter with panic, her eyes close to tears, and says with a tremulous voice, "It's about love." I think what she was saying was this: my mind is gone, but what matters most is my love for you and your love for me and your being here in my time of need. In Luke's version of our gospel story, the clever lawyer asks a follow-up question. "So I am to love my neighbor as myself, am I? Tell me, Jesus, who is my neighbor?" It was also a kind of trick question. On the night before he died, Martin Luther King preached about love, and the question, "Who is my neighbor?" Listen to his words. Jesus immediately pulled that question from mid-air and placed it on a dangerous curve between Jerusalem and Jericho. He talked about a certain man who had fallen among thieves, and that a Levite and a priest had passed by on the other side of the road. Finally, a man of another race came by. He got down from his beast, decided not to be the compassionate proxy and have someone else do the hard work. Jesus ended up saying this was the good man, because he had the capacity to project the I or me of self-interest into the you or him and be concerned about his brother. He did not ask the question, "If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?" He reversed the question, "If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?" If you don't stop to help, who will? And what will happen to those who need your help, among those whom we describe as marginalized? If not you, who? If not now, when? If not here, where? Who will enter into the sweep of your radar? And how will you help? What will it mean for you to love them? We started by asking about trick questions. These are not trick questions, but questions that matter here and now.